I've analyzed the data from thousands of playlists over the past 3 years, and I'm going to tell you how to spot the difference between bot playlists with fake listeners and real playlists with real listeners that are actually valuable for your music career. The secret lies in the metrics. The first step is to look at the signature of a perfect growth pattern. And by signature, I'm looking at this graph right here. And as our perfect example, I'm showing you one of the Spotify owned playlists, Feel Good Indie Rock. And you can see that this playlist is curated by Spotify. And if I change the graph to all, we can see that for the entire lifespan of this playlist, we have just seen consistent, varying, but consistent growth all the way up till now. And notice that this has nothing to do with the countries that the streams are coming from or the streams per listener. Spotify is a global app, so even this perfect example of a playlist is not geo-targeted at all. That is true across all playlists I'll be showing you today. This playlist will also provide more passive listeners because that's just a truth of all playlists. So now let's take a look at these analytics in depth and compare them. Right now, I want you to memorize this smooth growth path, because what this is indicative of is that people are discovering and finding this playlist organically, slowly over time in a natural pattern. And that's not the case when it comes to bot playlists, and that's the problem. Bot playlists are artificially generating streams, artificially simulating growth patterns. Now let's take a look at another playlist that I have found to be showing the signature of really sketchy bot patterns. Now, I usually don't like to pick on individual curators, but you guys have been begging in the comments to actually give specific examples and to call people out. And so this is really the first time I've ever been this specific in a video before. So this playlist, Road Trip Jams, is already showing daily decline over the last 3 months, but that's not what I'm necessarily worried about. I'm worried about the bigger picture. So I'm going to click all to show the broader graph, and I'll even zoom in on this a little bit for you. So check this out. Unlike our last Spotify owned playlist that showed consistent growth throughout the lifespan, this playlist has shown dramatic ups and downs and then ups again. It's this area right here that I am really cautious about, because we grew pretty consistently and then lost a significant amount of followers on this playlist. This is a sign of Spotify cleaning out all of the bot accounts, and it's being reflected here in the follower count of this playlist. And then it almost seems that the playlist owner tried to recover the follower count immediately after this drop. This has happened not only once, but 3 times over the lifespan of this playlist. So this is what I would call the signature of a third-party bot playlist that is artificially generating followers and streams, probably to try and trick independent artists to pay for a placement, which paying for a placement is fine. I'll talk about that more later in the video, but what you don't want to do is pay for something that's not even valuable. As with any value transfer, whether you're buying a guitar or a microphone or Facebook ads or even a playlist placement, you want to make sure that you're getting a fair value exchange. And I would say playlists like this are not a fair value exchange, because most of the listeners are not going to be real people, and that's not really what we want in marketing. Let's take a look at another playlist. This is a playlist that I've worked with before. It's called Sad Songs 2023, and I want to show you the contrast, right? This is not owned by Spotify. This is still a third-party playlist. However, if I look at the lifetime growth curve of this playlist, it is very similar to the Spotify owned playlist. And so this is an example of what I would say is a very good third-party curated playlist that is showing natural growth patterns. It doesn't have any weird red flags. It doesn't have any sudden peaks or dips in follower count where the curator is trying to buy followers or the bots are getting cleared out from the system. This looks like a healthy curve of organic discovery that's even continuing to this day, and this playlist is growing. So this, I would say, is a very healthy playlist and one that is valuable and that you would want your music to be on. Contrast that once again to this Sad Vibes playlist, which is declining today. That's really not a big deal. Once again, I'm going to show you an example of a good playlist that is declining and how that can get turned around. So stay tuned for that in a few minutes. But this playlist is declining now, but over the course of the lifespan is still showing those weird ups and downs. I don't know how this was grown initially, but at some point Spotify decided that the followers needed to get cleared out, that they were not real people, that they were bot accounts. And so that is reflected by a sudden dip in the follower count. And then they tried to recover. They did whatever they had to do to get it back up. And whatever those marketing techniques were, it was punished by Spotify again with another dip. And then they tried to overcompensate for that dip with even more strange growth, and then it continues to drop to this day. This is what I would totally classify as sketchy. And by the way, if you want more examples of this, if you want a more in-depth analysis, I do have a case study that's linked in the description below. It's just a Google Doc, so it's totally free. You don't have to sign up for anything. So you can read more and learn more about the difference between good playlists and ones that are seemingly using bots. Another thing I want to point out is that this playlist hasn't been updated since 2021, and I'm filming this almost 2 years later since its last update. So you can see that it has also been abandoned. There have been more clean outs by Spotify of bot accounts, and they haven't even attempted to recover from that. So this is just a little side note that bot playlists don't really have longevity. You might be placed on them and then you might get zero traction because whatever racket that they're using in the beginning to build the account, it could be abandoned altogether. Unlike a playlist such as this one, which is currently growing, and it's probably growing due to it ranking high in the Spotify search results. And I can actually test that for you right now by just pulling up the search chill rap, which is the name of the playlist, and you can see that it's the 4th result organically. So there is a really high chance that people are using the search bar to discover this playlist, and that's why the playlist owner doesn't need to use bots, doesn't need to artificially bump up the numbers, bump up the streams, and do sketchy stuff like that. And if I look at the entire lifespan of the playlist, it has always been this way, with a smooth growth curve, very much like our Spotify owned playlist. That's why these third-party playlists are valuable, is because they have a lot of the similarities that are desirable with the Spotify owned playlists. And so this is what you want to look for. But now I want to show you what I would say is a perfectly legit playlist, but dormant. And it's a really interesting thing. So here's a playlist called Relaxing Music 2020. And as you can tell by the date, this playlist is old. It's currently 2023 at the time of filming. So this playlist was created and was not really updated for some reason. But if I look at the playlist history, you can see that it was grown organically, and then at some point, because of the age of the playlist, the curator for some reason never updated the name or updated the playlist as the years continued on. And so you can see that it grew really nicely and organically, but at this point here, the followers just stopped and leveled off. And is this necessarily the sign of a bad playlist? I would say no, this is not a bad playlist, it's just dormant. So you still have over 45,000 real followers of this playlist who are probably still listening to the music on this playlist. However, it's just not growing, probably because it's not in the search results anymore. It's no longer relevant for discovery. So I am calling this playlist kind of legit but dormant. However, there are some Spotify owned playlists that are in this exact same scenario and can be turned around. I want to show you this summer barbecue playlist, which is really interesting. I'm really showing you this just to nerd out at this point. So this is owned by Spotify. This is not third party. This is managed by Spotify staff. And right here we can see in the 3-month view that this playlist was declining, but then it shot up in recent days. And if I look at a full year, you can see it's very similar to the relaxing music curve. You can see that this playlist was growing, and then it leveled off, probably because it wasn't summer anymore. But now the stats are turning around. So when it comes to these dormant playlists, it is very possible for a curator to say, oh my gosh, I have this playlist, which is an asset. It was grown using legitimate methods. I should just update the name, update the playlist, add some new artists on here, and maybe I can get this ranking in the search results again and turn this playlist around. And I have no doubt this is what the curator is going to do eventually. They just haven't gotten around to it yet. So it's really interesting to see that this can even happen with Spotify owned playlists as well. And so it's really the nefarious actions. It's the bot activity. It's the fake buying of fans that you really want to look out for when it comes to bot playlists, because even Spotify owned playlists can have their ups and downs, and it can have their time, and it can go dormant and even lose followers from time to time depending on how often that playlist is updated or even the time of the year. Now, there is one last big mistake that artists make when using playlists to promote their Spotify, and it's not understanding what playlists actually do to grow your music. There are actually different ways to grow your Spotify, and there are pros and cons of each method. So if you want to learn more about that, I'll link a video right here that explains all the pros and cons of playlisting and all the pros and cons of using Facebook ads to grow your Spotify so that you can know the right method to use for your marketing goals. Thanks so much for watching. Hit subscribe if this video helped you, and I'll see you in the next one.